Hello and welcome to the e-business edition installation guide. What I'm going to do is I'm going to install the e-business product over the top of a standard enterprise installation. So I've already on this machine got enterprise SQL with the demo and model, the demo UK database and the model database. So if we wait for this to unpack, now it's unpacked, we're ready to install. The second page is the license agreements where we're agreeing to the Enterprise Suite license and also the ASP.NET Storefront license agreement. This page is where we choose the actual feature we want to have installed. Now I've already installed Enterprise on this machine, so all I want is the e-commerce component. So I'll cancel the others out. You'll see the path down here, which you can obviously change, is going to the e-business path. Now my existing installation is actually installed to the standard enterprise path, but I'm going to leave that as default so that we can see what it actually installs. This page isn't important because we've already installed SQL, it's just part of the installation steps. This final page is where we decide that we actually want the virtual directory created. Now, as I'm installing on XP Pro, I don't get a choice to change my actual default website. I've only got one, but I can change my virtual folder that goes within. Now, I'm going to leave this as standard, and I'd recommend that you do that too, because there are additional couple of settings to get the actual web service for the storefront working if you change this. It can all be changed later anyway. You know, you can delete the virtual directory it creates and creates a new one or whatever. But we'll leave it as standard for the time being. If you are installing on a server environment, then you can change this to whatever default, to whatever website you've actually got installed. You know, you want to install it to. Okay, just confirms what we're going to do. And away we go installing. During the installation, this error message has come up. It's very intermittent whether it does or it doesn't. It's not that important. It's just a case of we're going to need to amend a file when it's installed. So if I click OK, I may find it'll come back again. I think it's sometimes it can come back 2 or 3 times. Okay, so we've successfully finished the installation. Now what we do is go to IIS, which is in the control panel, administrative tools, internet information services. We can see under the default website the 2 directories that have been created on the install. One's my website and the other one's my web service. At the minute I'm only interested in my website. If I right click on properties, you can see the directory it's pointing to is the directory we installed our e-business edition to. And there's nothing stopping me deleting these virtual directories and creating a new one to that physical directory. It doesn't, you know, by deleting the virtual directory, it doesn't change anything in the physical directory. It's solely just for IIS. Now, if I try and browse, I get an error. And the reason I get that error is because because we got that error on installations through the configuration file. What's happened is it hasn't been able to change the actual web.config file to allow me to log into the correct database. So I need to actually do it manually. So to do that, open up my configuration tool. The actual web.config file that's within the ASP.NET Storefront folder. Be careful that you don't get confused with the wrong directory. I've got a few installs on my machine here, so I need to make sure I go to the correct one. And there's the correct one. Be careful that you don't change the one in the web service folder. There's one in there also. That's the incorrect one to be changing for this. That's to do with the web service. It takes a little while to open. Once it's opened, it gives us the logon credentials of the actual website. So what we can do is we want to change it to our Demo UK. We need to give it a username and password. Now what I suggest if you're creating a website is I suggest that you create a new an account using the same user role as the administrator. Just give it full access rights and create something like web user within Enterprise. Let's go and do that. Let's open up Enterprise. Now the reason for this is that the actual website logs on to the database, and when transactions, when it does transactions like create sales orders, creates customers accounts, the user that actually does it is obviously logged against that. If you just leave it as admin, then all the web transactions come in as admin. So when you're actually looking from an audit trail point of view, you've got all these admin transactions, and you don't know whether that's someone logging in as admin or the actual website. So if we just log on, wrong module, System Manager, let's create a new user account. We'll call that the web user. We just leave the user role as it is, the administrator. Okay, now that's done. I'll change my user role, put my correct password in. I then need to change my database name. So this is my server name. So in my case, it's local for / SQL Express. This could be, if you've got full SQL, generally it's the server name. It may be an IP address, but bearing in mind the if you've got two separate machines, you've got a database server and a web server, they need to be on the same LAN. Okay, they can't be running over the web. They need to have a proper, preferably 10 to 1,000 connection between each other, and a proper LAN connection. 10 to 100 should be okay, should be fine, but certainly not over the internet or over a virtual private network. It has to be on the same physical, the same physical location. Okay, I'm going to use Windows authentication. What you will find is if you put it on two separate machines, you have to use SQL authentication. So obviously you'll have to create a SQL account on your SQL instance, and then give the logon credentials in there. Oh, I failed. So why have I failed? Let's have a look. Oh, I've spelled it incorrectly. Okay. Now I've correctly I've connected. You also need to make sure this isn't important at all for the web.config, but this one is. What you'll see there is that that's my website, and if I have multiple websites, I'd have them appearing in there. So for each, so what I do is I pick the correct website. Now to keep it simple, I've just got one in there at the moment. To deal with multiple websites, we'll do another guide. Okay, the other important thing to change here is I want to set the Demo UK to the default, because that then this dictates that this is the connection that the website will be using. Now, a little tip here is press the save button here, because if there's anything wrong with any of my details, it'll flag them up there. If I press save and close and there's a problem, it'll tell me, but then it'll bomb out and won't save it. For example, if I put the wrong password in there, it says incorrect password. Now, if I'd saved and closed, it would just exit, so I'll lose all my details. So it can be a little annoying. So yeah, they're all correct. Save and close. Now if we go back to IIS and browse, you can see the website actually appears. So we close this down and actually go into go into Internet Explorer and type localhost ASP.NET Storefront IIS, you can see our website actually appears. Now, if you have changed the actual virtual directory that it uses, I did say there's a couple of settings that you need to change, and they are, if you go into the web store, into your website, these details here. So if it, for example, you just put storefront or whatever ASP2 or ASP or whatever, you need to amend that there, and you'd also need to amend this here. The other thing as well, obviously I'm working in a demo environment here, so it's fine for me to have local host. But if you're got your server on your website on a server, which you will have, you'll need to actually give this the IP address of the actual server. Otherwise, when you come to upload pictures through Enterprise, it won't work. So, for example, you put 217 dot or 88.248.44.48 your virtual directory, or it may just be your IP address there. The way to test it, to see if this actually works, is to reset of web cache. If that completes, then you know those are working. If I change these, just put a 2, you'll get an error message like that. And that way you know you've got an issue. So let's change that back. It's fine. The other issues you may come across while installing is user permissions. Again, I'm working in a demo environment. It's all on my machine, so I'm not coming in over an external IP. But one of the things that you need to make sure of is this directory that you're actually accessing the actual security on it. You've got a couple of different users. One in XP, you need to have the ASP.NET Storefront user added, and you actually need to give it permissions. I haven't done that yet, so let's do that. You need to give it read write, and you need to populate those down into the directory. And if you're using a server environment, then you need to have the network service user and do the same. And the other one is the internet guest account. You need to give those read write permissions as well. And what that internet guest account will do is actually give access to people coming in over an external IP address to that web service. They'll actually be able to view the page, otherwise they'll have an error. The other use permissions we need to set up is there's 3 folders within Enterprise eBusiness ASP.NET Storefront folder that need to have write permissions. One's the custom plugin directory. So again, for the ASP.NET or the network service, depending on if you're working on XP or a server respectively. Download is the other folder. And the last but not least is the images directory, because you upload images. What you'll find, if I don't actually give the permissions on this folder, let's not do that. If I just take one of my images, notice it's validating the URL when I go in here. Again, you'll get an error message if it can't do it, just like I did when I reset the web cache. Go to the images directory. So we'll just use the wheel for the time being. What you'll find is you'll get an error message like that. Okay, and if you actually read it, all it's saying is access denied to the directory ASP.NET Storefront. So what I need to do is I need to go back into my directory, onto the images, properties, security, ASP.NET Storefront, and give write permissions. What we find now when we upload, successful. And what you'll see is in that directory, within the product folder, you'll see the different sizes of images that we can upload. And within large, you'll see my large wheel, because I've actually imported a large image. And what it does, it just takes that image, renames it, obviously creates a copy, doesn't take your change your existing the image you're uploading from, and gives it the name of the counter of the actual product. So item 100 frame is actually number 19 in my database, so it renames that the image 19. We'll come back to images in more detail, but just gives you an idea of how they're stored. They're stored in a directory on the server. They're not actually stored within the DB. So from a backup perspective, you need to make sure that you obviously back these up as well, this whole folder. Okay, that about rounds up the installation guide for e-commerce.